Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. As always, I'm so happy to be back here again with a new video. And if you are new here, hello and welcome. Why don't you stick around to see what kind of shocking true crime story I have for you today. And also please do subscribe to the channel for more true crime content. Alright, I hope you guys are good and that you've had a good week so far and that your day has been good to you today. And for this week's case, I'm going to be doing something a little bit different, something for the first time ever on my channel. I'm going to be talking about 3 different people's cases in one video. And the reason I'm doing this is because these cases were suggested to me by one of my amazing subscribers. So Shelly, thank you again for bringing this case to my attention. And if any of you guys also have any case recommendations for me, please do drop them down in the comments and I will look into them as soon as I possibly can. Or you could just message me on Facebook. I will leave a link to my Facebook account in the description box. And in this case, I will be talking about murder and sexual assault, so viewer discretion is advised. That being said, sit back, relax, and let me tell you all about the cases of Krystle Knott, Karina Wolfe, and Rene Gunning. Now, the first 2 cases of this video take place in Alberta, Canada, specifically in the capital city of Alberta, which is Edmonton. And this is where 16-year-old Krystle Knott and 19-year-old Rene Gunning went missing on February 18th in 2005. Now, since in this case I will be talking about 3 different people, we're going to start first by talking about Krystle Knott, and then we're going to go to Rene Young, and then we're going to finish off with Karina Wolfe. Krystle lived with and was raised by her aunt Doris and her uncle Dave. And since she grew up being raised by them, she also grew up calling them mom and dad. The family lived in Grande Prairie, Alberta. And since Krystle grew up there most of her childhood, she enjoyed going outside, playing outside, and just exploring a lot of things. She loved being out in nature, camping, and climbing trees. She basically loved everything that had to do with the great outdoors and just being out in nature. Her aunt Doris described her as a nature girl. She said she was the type of girl who would rather walk into the woods to have an adventure than to go out to town. She also described her as a very helpful person who always wanted to be polite to everyone she came across. And she also described her as a very beautiful girl. But Doris also talked about how she always warned Krystle against hitchhiking because it could be dangerous and you could never know what could happen to you out there. But she also knew that Krystle was the kind of person who loved to explore, and she was also an adventurous spirit. So even though she did warn her against hitchhiking, Krystle had a habit of hitchhiking. And even though Krystle still had a mom, they were not really on the best speaking terms. And because of this, Krystle would often act out and hitchhike despite her aunt again warning her not to hitchhike because it could be dangerous. Krystle's mother lived in Dawson Creek, BC, and she wanted Krystle to move in with her so she could raise her herself, and this was 1 month before Krystle turned 15. Krystle wanted to become a veterinarian because of the huge love she had for animals and nature as well, and this was her lifelong goal. And her family and friends had no doubt that she would have been able to accomplish this dream had her life not been ended so early in 2005. Okay guys, so now that we've talked a little bit about Krystle Knott, let me go ahead and tell you guys a little bit more about the second victim of this case, Rene Gunning. And even though there really isn't a lot of information out there about Rene, I'm gonna have to work with what I got right now. And also, there isn't a lot of information out there about who Rene's mother is, but what we do know is that her father's name is Jerome Gunning. And like a lot of other kids out there, Jerome was adopted as a baby, and he lived out his life with his adopted parents. Then at the age of 17, Jerome finally got in touch with his biological family, but something must have gone wrong because after this, he started going down a path of alcoholism, and this is believed to have been one of the reasons that led to the separation between him and Rene's mother. And they separated after they had already had their kids. And after they separated, Rene's mother took the kids and moved away with them. However, even though Rene and her siblings were now living with their mother, they would often be in and out of foster care from time to time, and they only got to see their dad, Jerome, once or twice a year. And then when Rene was 13 years old, Jerome decided that he was going to get sober and clean. And then on one occasion, he wanted to go see his kids, but when he got there, he realized that Rene was missing. So he filed a missing persons report, and then he also went out to go look for his daughter himself. Eventually, Jerome found Rene sleeping on someone else's couch. Then after this, he decided to call a family meeting with his kids to tell them that he was going to get his life together and they could also come and live with him if they would like to, since their mother kept on leaving them in foster care every now and then. So he said that he wanted to give them some form of stability in their lives. Apparently, only one of his sons wanted to go live with him, but Rene said that she didn't want to leave her friends behind, so she wanted to stay behind. But then when Jerome came back to pick up his son, apparently Rene changed her mind about staying behind after going through a breakup with a boy she was seeing at the time. So now she and her brother and her dad were now going to go live together in Dawson Creek, BC. When Rene was 17 years old, she had a son named DeAndre. And when she was 19 years old, she was getting out of an abusive relationship. And she had also suffered a recent miscarriage. So her life wasn't really that easy. So during this time, this is when she decided to hitchhike to Edmonton with a friend of hers named Naomi. And they wanted to go and chill and just hang out and just take it easy. So after the 5-hour hiking journey to Edmonton with various truck drivers, some of which tried to be a little bit creepy towards these young ladies, they finally arrived in Edmonton and they decided to go hang out at the West Edmonton Mall. And when they got there, they also rented a storage locker so they could leave their belongings there for the rest of the day. Now, both Naomi and Rene were shocked to bump into a friend of theirs they knew from middle school back in Dawson Creek. And it turned out that she also hitchhiked to West Edmonton Mall, and this friend of theirs was Krystle Knott, and she was also there with a friend of hers named Sarah. So this is where Krystle and Rene came across each other before they both went missing in February of 2005. Rene decided to buy some vodka so she could mix it with some Sprite, and so the four girls decided to hang out together and chill at the mall. Then later that day, Sarah and Naomi decided to go to a house party that they were invited to, and according to Naomi, she couldn't really remember much of the rest of that evening after that. But what she did remember was that Krystle and Rene decided not to go to the house party with them. They decided to hang back at the mall, and she also said something about a cute boy. So I'm guessing that they decided not to go to the house party with Sarah and Naomi because of this cute boy they might have seen at the mall. Krystle and Rene told Sarah and Naomi that they would catch up with them later on at the party, but then they ended up changing their minds and they called Sarah and Naomi to tell them that they decided to hitchhike home instead. But it wasn't really confirmed if they went to Dawson Creek or to Fort St. John. But after this phone call, this was the last time Krystle and Rene were ever seen alive again. As soon as it was realized that they were missing, both these girls were reported missing at their respective RCMP detachments in Dawson Creek and Fort St. John. But it was said that it was the Fort St. John police who had a press release on February 28th to appeal to the public to help out in finding the whereabouts of Rene Gunning. Now, Naomi, the one who hitchhiked to Edmonton with Rene, returned home, and everyone was happy to see that she was okay, but they were also concerned that Rene was still nowhere to be found. She was still missing. Naomi was questioned extensively about the trip they took to Edmonton, but she wasn't able to give out that much information. The only information she could ever give out was the description of their outfits and where she last saw them before they went missing. But that was all she could give at that point. But even though she also gave out information that Rene and Krystle were together when they went missing, for some reason, the RCMP only seemed to focus on Rene's case and not so much on Krystle's case, because on the next press release they had, they only mentioned Rene, and they didn't really talk much about Krystle. Then when they did another press conference on June 10th in 2005, they somewhat mentioned Krystle, but not by her name, and they didn't really mention her as a missing person. They said, quote, Rene is believed to have left back to the Fort St. John area in the company of another female who is from Dawson Creek. The pair were thought to be hitchhiking for transport, end quote. So because there wasn't really any focus on Krystle's case, the public didn't really focus their efforts on trying to find two missing girls. They were only trying to find just one girl, and that's Rene. And things went on like this for 3 years. No one was looking for Krystle for 3 whole years because the public didn't know anything about her. And while things were happening like this, the two cases were investigated separately by the two detachments of the RCMP in Dawson Creek and Fort St. John. And this makes no sense to me whatsoever personally, because these girls were last seen together and they went missing on the same day. So I don't understand why the cases had to be separated as if like they were different. And this went on like this until in 2008 when the cases were transferred to the CARE unit in Alberta. And this is a policing unit that was established within the RCMP to stand against the rise of missing and murdered Indigenous women and vulnerable people in the province of Alberta. This unit also provides victim services and advocacy for the victims and their families, as well as outreach services for vulnerable people in Alberta. So on February 18th in 2008, 3 years after these girls went missing, with the efforts of the CARE unit, the cases were finally dubbed a double missing person case. So finally, Krystle's side of this case was taken a lot more seriously by the RCMP. But when the RCMP's Alberta Division's then spokesperson was asked why Krystle's case was never given much attention, she responded by saying that the case was given enough attention given the information the investigators had at the time. But it makes no sense to me that it took 3 years for any action to be taken regarding Krystle's case or her disappearance. Because again, these girls went missing on the same day and they were last seen together when they went missing. So Krystle's case should have been regarded from the very beginning. Now, it wasn't really confirmed if there was any large-scale searches for these girls, but what is known is that Krystle's aunt and uncle, Doris and Dave, moved to Edmonton to try to look for Krystle themselves. And also Rene's father, Jerome, made a number of trips to Edmonton to go look for Rene himself as well. And he would often go to the West Edmonton Mall thinking that Rene could possibly go back there again because he also didn't have any idea where else he could look for her. Rene's father was also called in to the RCMP station a number of times to try to identify if any of the belongings or any of the clothes that investigators found belonged to his daughter Rene. However, each time he went to try to identify them, he had to tell the investigators that they did not belong to his daughter. Then on May 22nd in 2011, two campers found 2 skulls at the Grande Prairie in Alberta, about 457 kilometers or 284 miles from Edmonton. Then soon after that, unfortunately, the skulls were identified as Krystle and Rene's remains. And even though only their skulls and one other bone was ever found, after an extensive search was conducted by the investigators, their deaths were deemed suspicious. But the cause of death was never determined. Now, it's quite possible that these girls were killed by someone who picked them up on their way to Dawson Creek, because the Grande Prairie where their remains were found is on the way to Dawson Creek from Edmonton, according to Google Maps. However, since this discovery, the case ended up going cold, and there hasn't been any known lead regarding these girls' murders. And when Jerome Gunning talked about the help that he was now getting from the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women Inquiry, he said the only update he was ever getting at this point was to tell him that a different investigator is now being assigned to this case. and that was it. Krystle and Rene's families still have no answers of who did this to their daughters and why. And again, according to my research, this case wasn't really well handled by the police. And judging from that, personally, I think it could be the reason the families might not get any answers moving forward for a very long time. It's really heartbreaking that these girls' lives had to be ended at such a young age, before they could even see what life had to offer for them. And what's even more heartbreaking is the fact that justice hasn't and might not even ever be served for their deaths. It's seriously heartbreaking. But if you or anyone you know might have any information regarding this case that could help out investigators, please contact the Grande Prairie Royal Canadian Mounted Police on 1780-830-5770. And who knows, even the little bit of information you might have could end up solving this case and bringing the families some closure. Alright guys, now we're going to talk about the third case of this video. We're going to talk about the murder of Karina Wolfe. Now the good thing about this case is that it was actually taken seriously by the police and the media. They took charge and they handled it professionally. So sit back, relax, and let me tell you all about the case of Karina Wolfe. Karina Wolfe was a 19-year-old Indigenous woman who was also a very talented artist and writer. Karina also wanted to express her artistic side through changing hair colors. She would have a brown, hot pink, red, or even a blue hairdo to express her artistic views. The people who loved her really admired the talent she had for writing and painting. And even though there really isn't much of her work online, her mom said that, well, her mom Carol said that she wrote passionately in her journal and she loved to paint. Karina moved from her hometown of Prince Albert to Saskatoon in Saskatchewan, Canada, and she wanted to go live with her brother Desmond. Now, unfortunately, at some point, Karina struggled with an addiction to crystal meth, but she also tried turning her life around, and she was now attending a drug treatment program, and she was also a final year at high school. Karina's mother, Carol, had a difficulty hearing, so because of this, she would often use sign language to communicate. So Karina took the efforts to learn sign language, and she would also help out as an interpreter for her mom whenever she was talking to someone who did not understand sign language. You could tell that Karina and her mom were very close, and she was also very close with her brother Desmond. Karina's family was very important to her. Even during the times she would disappear because of her addiction, she would still keep in touch with her mom and her brother. And she would also never miss an important occasion like holidays or birthdays. So she would always try the best way she could to be there for her family. After completing her drug program, Karina was now looking forward to the future. And she also planned on moving back into her mother's place in Prince Albert. And this was before she went missing on July 10th in 2010. In an interview, Karina's mom said when she was sitting at a bus stop near her home, Karina came back in a gray convertible that was driven by an unidentified man who seemed much older than her. But Karina said that this was her boyfriend's friend, but she didn't really give out his name. Karina also asked her mom for a house key, and then Carol told her that Desmond would be around and then he would be able to open for her when she came back. So after this, Karina told her mom that she would be back later that night. The last thing that Carol remembers was saying "I love you" to her daughter before she saw her getting back into that gray convertible that she had seen earlier. She had no idea that she would never see her alive again. Now, according to investigators, the man in the gray convertible left Karina off at a gas station, and then later on she would call him asking for money, but this man refused to give her money for some reason. Now, this was the last known contact with Karina Wolfe. Then 9 days later, on July 19th, it was Karina's mom's birthday, and Carol knew that Karina would never miss her birthday. So with that being said, she took some pictures she had of Karina, and she was walking around asking anyone if they had seen her anywhere. And even though she had difficulty hearing, which would have made communication difficult, that did not stop her from trying to find her daughter. She was still determined to look for her. Then after a few more days of looking for her without any sign of her daughter, Carol finally went to the Saskatoon Police Department to report her daughter missing. And again, like I said, Karina's case was taken very seriously by the police, so as soon as Carol reported her missing, immediately the police took action. The police questioned all of Karina's friends and acquaintances, and they also set out to question the man who was driving that gray convertible that she was last seen with on the day or night of her disappearance. The public got to know about this case very quickly because not only did police make public appeals, billboards were also put up, so Karina's face was always there for people to see. There were also vigils and walks that were held in the name of Karina. However, even with all these efforts, Karina was still nowhere to be found. The whereabouts of Karina were unknown for over 5 years. And during those 5 years, police would also visit Carol on a monthly basis to go talk to her and check on her, and also, to give her some updates on the case, and also to give her some hope that they still hadn't given up on finding her daughter. And I think that is just very awesome to do, because it's better than just being quiet for that 5 years and leaving the family in the dark. So again, they were taking it very seriously. The man who drove the gray convertible remained a person of interest, and investigators, even though they interrogated him as much as they possibly could, they still couldn't get any more information out of him, but they also couldn't rule him out as a suspect. So he remained a person of interest. And also, even with the tips they got, they always led them to dead ends, but they still were not giving up. Carol also campaigned throughout to keep her daughter's disappearance fresh in people's minds. And actually, she not only campaigned for Karina, she also campaigned for many of the other unsolved missing and murder cases of young women and girls in Saskatchewan. She attended all kinds of fundraisers, vigils, and press conferences to keep her daughter's case and all the other cases in people's minds. And even though for 5 years, every tip that came in led to a dead end, a man by the name of Jerome Constant, also known as Jerry Constant, took notice of this case and all the attention that was brought to it. And after 2 months, Jerry Constant simply walked into a police station and confessed to the murder of Karina Wolfe. Now, Jerry was never on police radar regarding this case because no one knew that he ever knew Karina. And this is because on the night he killed her, this was their very first time meeting each other. The only known version of events are according to what Jerry said to the police. So we cannot really confirm if there are other versions or not, but we're gonna have to talk about what happened in accordance to what he told the police. So the following is what happened according to Jerry Constant. He said he met Karina down the street from where she was dropped off at the gas station. Now, what Karina didn't know when she was talking to this man was that Jerry was actually a convicted sex offender, and that he was also convicted of assault causing bodily harm and sexual assault causing bodily harm in 2001 and again in 2006 for assault. Another thing that Karina didn't know was that Jerry was mad at his girlfriend for some reason, and he was out looking for sex that night. So when he came across Karina, after they talked for a while, they both agreed that Karina would perform a sexual act on him in his car. Then at some point, they drove back to his apartment. Then after this, Jerry said at some point he got angry with Karina for some reason, and he snapped at her and he strangled her until she died. Then after killing her, he said that he just left her body laying there in his apartment, but he didn't exactly say where in his apartment, and he just continued to watch a movie that night. Then after watching the movie, he decided that he had to get rid of any evidence that he might have left on Karina's body. So what he did was he took the body and then he put it in a bathtub and he started washing Karina's body. And when he was done, he put it in garbage bags and then he drove to a swampy area just outside of Saskatoon, and that's where he left the body. The body was only found by investigators after Jerry Constant took them to that location on November 14th in 2015. After this, a memorial service was held for Karina on December 1st in 2015, and people came to pay their respects and also remember Karina with her family. Then on December 3rd, Karina was taken to her final resting place, and people came in to support the family and help send Karina off with love, dignity, and respect. Now, when it comes to Jerry Constant, he underwent some psychiatric evaluations, and luckily he was found fit to stand trial. So he was definitely going to face justice for what he did to Karina. On June 17th in 2016, Jerry Constant pled guilty to second-degree murder and offering an indignity to human remains. He was facing life in prison, but with the possibility of parole in 10 to 25 years. So at the end of the trial, he was found guilty and he was sentenced to life in prison, but with a possibility of parole after 14 years for the second-degree murder charge. Then he was also given an additional 5 years on the charge of offering an indignity to human remains. When Carol was giving out an impact statement, she was helped by a sign language translator. And Jerry Constant had no reaction, and his facial expression was just blank during that moment. Carol spoke about how she will never be able to understand why he decided to take her beautiful daughter's life. She said that what he did shattered her life and also her family's life, so this definitely took a heavy toll on the Wolfe family, and this man had no reaction whatsoever. Since then, Karina's mom has always been a strong advocate for the missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls and their families. So much so that on November 3rd in 2017, she was testifying at the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls inquiry, and she was telling the story of her daughter, and she uses the story of her daughter to help other families who are experiencing the same thing. And I, for one, think that Karina would be very proud of what her mom is doing in her name. But yeah, guys, these were the cases of Krystle Knott, Rene Gunning, and Karina Wolfe. 3 young women who only wanted to live their lives and have a future for themselves, but were taken away too soon from this world. I send out my sympathies to the families, and I hope these young ladies are resting in peace. And that is all that I have for you guys on these cases. Please do let me know what you think about them in the comments. I will be looking forward to hearing from you. And also, if you enjoyed watching, please do me a big favor and leave the video a thumbs up so my channel can reach out to more people. I would seriously appreciate that. And also, thank you guys for hanging out with me today. Again, as always, I do appreciate you taking time out of your day to support my channel. And if you are new here, please be part of the family and subscribe to the channel for more true crime content. That being said, I'll see you guys in the next video. So until then, take care of yourselves, enjoy the rest of your day, and cheers.